Blessed day to you. My name is Nigel Daring, the originator of the philosophy of Darinism. It's a philosophy based on my analysis of existence. Um, and also, I find that what I've come up with correlates very well with what's in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. And so um, it ends up being a philosophy of that verifies and validates, in a sense, Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. I have done 6 previous videos. I hope you'll check those out before you come to this one. And in this particular video, what I'm going to do is answer some questions that people generally have about Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, about existence in general. And so I'm going to take on 4 great questions. Before I do that, I just want to review what it is that I did that we went over before. So we said last time that God created people, Adam and Eve, with consciousness in reflection of his identity. Everything else that he had created in the physical realm were programmed. They're part of their program to function. So they're not conceptual creatures in the sense that they don't produce ideas. They're not conceptual beings. They don't have consciousness to them, right? The animals don't have the other animals don't have consciousness to them. The plants don't have consciousness to them. The earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the whole energy field, it doesn't have consciousness. They're programmed to function how they function. But God, being a conscious being, right, decided that he was going to create man in his image, and that means having that spiritual identity that he has, which has consciousness. Our consciousness at its most primal level rests within our spirit. All right? So God created us with consciousness, this ability to have ideas, to generate ideas, to process ideas. All right. Now, by us being conscious at a spiritual level, and God also putting us in flesh, taking us as conscious beings and embedding us in our physical form, and in particular in the center. Our center is our brain. So he embedded us in our perceptive, what I call our perceptive corpus, meaning within our brain, where we're integrating all these signals, these different signals from the outside environment, where our body is picking up all these signals, and then we're processing them in our brain, and perceiving them to become real. And so by God embedding us in our consciousness, in our perceptive corpus, in our brain, then we become real. Then we become real in time and space, in a sense. We get to see, we get to perceive time and space. Okay, so God created us in reflection of his identity as conscious beings, and he also put us in flesh. Now, by virtue of our nature, by virtue of human nature, as being conscious beings, um, human beings have a choice, and that's reflected in this choice that Adam and Eve are presented, and it's a choice between good and evil. It's a choice between spirit and flesh, right? So it's a now what the choices are. It's this tree of life, which we identified as the body of God. It's a spiritual entity. And then you have the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is their brain. And their brain, of course, is their physical, constitutes the center of their identity. They're in the physical realm. So that's why these trees are centers. The spiritual tree, which is the tree of life, is the center of all, the behavioral center of all existence in the spiritual realm, even unto the physical realm. The tree of knowledge of good and evil constitutes man's physical center in the physical dimension. Now, what's involved in these choices? It's because one is spiritual and one is physical. God is saying to them, here are your choices. Now, if you choose to live in spirit, which is to feed off the body of God, right? And and by feeding off the body of God, there's this by virtue of doing that, by getting that opportunity, you have to obey God's voice. So God is telling you, telling Adam, feed off the tree of life, and that's an instruction. It's not only an instruction, it's a standard. The idea is you obey God, you get this opportunity, this benefit to feed off this tree of life. Okay? So the choice, then the other choice is, if you feed off the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then that you're gonna die, right? Which is, if you seek after flesh, if you start ingraining your identity in your physical form and you focus on that for life, you take your consciousness and believe in this physical form that you have, that it's your identity, then you're gonna die, right? Now, the devil comes along. So God presents this choice to them. The devil comes along and puts another perspective on the choice that they have. The devil says to them, basically, what your creator did was lie to you. If you feed off the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you're not going to die. What it is, you can gain another sense of identity. You can become as God himself. And what is going on? What is meant by that? In the spiritual realm, if Adam and Eve are getting to feed off this tree of life, right, this benefit of feeding off the tree of life, they have to listen to God. It is God that is at the center, right? So this is the ego here with consciousness being relevant. God is the ego center, and they're in his periphery. He's the one that's coordinating and dictating reality, and they're supposed to be listening and obeying him. Whatever it is, whatever ideas he projects, they're supposed to receive that truth and go along with it. So they're in the spiritual realm, they're in his periphery, they're not center. What the devil is telling them, they can be their own God if they take on physical life, if they take on flesh for identity, right? And they can now use the center, the brain, and become become a God himself. They can think for themselves. They can dictate their own reality. They don't have to have God dictate their reality. They don't have to live in the realm of spirit and have their reality dictated to them, right? They can live in flesh, take on flesh for identity, and then they can become real in the realm of the physical, and become their own God. They can believe themselves to be their own God by simply thinking for themselves, using that brain that they're wrapped up in. Don't so the devil is saying this is an opportunity, don't waste it. Don't just be wrapped up in flesh and just take God's instruction and just have your flesh form reflect whatever you're doing in spirit, right? He's saying take your focus off God. Don't be in his image, don't be his reflection as you're intended to be, but rather declare your independence and become your own God. Now, that Adam and Eve are enticed by the devil's decision, and they're and that and they're following the devil's decision as a set of consequences. The first thing is that what you'll notice in Genesis chapter 3 is that they become insecure. The moment they feed off this tree of knowledge of good and evil, they become insecure, right? They notice it. They're ashamed. They're right. Their eyes were opened, right? They're open to the world of flesh. Before their eyes were focused in spirit, and flesh was just this shadow, this illusion that's there. But now their eyes are open to flesh as a reality, and being open to flesh as a reality, they also becomes insecure. Why is that? What the devil told them was that chase after, be your own God. What it is, God already made them in their natural state as a reflection of Him. They were already God. But what it is, the devil is in effect telling them to do is have an ambition. Have ambition. Don't just be in time and space, just relaxing, enjoying this whole thing as God is encouraging you to do, and just feeding off the of the trees and having the animals as companions, and you just relax and enjoy the whole thing. The devil is saying you can be better than this. You can be your own God. Now that very notion that who you are isn't appropriate, what in your natural state isn't appropriate, that you should be chasing something else, that once you accept that very idea that you need to be somebody else, you need to be something else, then what it is, you're looking at your current state and you're ashamed. You're saying to yourself, what I am is currently inadequate. This is where Adam's and Eve consciousness ends up being under the devil's advice. They become ashamed of themselves because they want to become something else. All right, so that's the shame. Now that insecurity that they develop, that's death. That's the death that God is talking about. Because remember, after when God called out to them and called out to Adam, said, Adam, where are you? Adam, where are you? Right? And Adam said, I was naked and afraid, so I hid myself. And God said, how did you know you're naked? Who told you you're naked? Did you eat off? You ate off of that tree that I told you not to eat off, right? Because what God is hearing Adam say when he's saying I'm naked, what God is hearing is Adam say I'm dead. Adam is not accepting it. He's not accepting it. That is shame as his death. God is hearing I'm dead. Adam is not recognizing his death. What he should really have done in any moral sense was say to God, listen, oh my God, God, I made a mistake. Look at me, I'm dead. I'm dead, I'm insecure. But he's not accepting it. What he's saying, he's under the influence of the devil and the devil's advice, and he's basically claiming that to God, I have found life in flesh. He's not apologizing. He's basically saying, I just went and I hid myself. He's not ashamed. He's not accepting the death. He's found life in flesh. He's made flesh his reality. He's made the material realm his reality. That's where his identity is. But that's the death. Here's the other aspect of the death. Everything in spirit is feeding off the tree of life. Even the material realm, it's all at its base feeding off the tree of life. Man, for his spiritual being, like all spiritual being, even God himself is feeding off the tree of life. God is feeding, the tree of life is his body. He's feeding off his own body, right? So everything is feeding off the tree of life. Here's the death. God banned Adam and Eve from the tree of life when they sinned, because they're disobeying him. He's not allowing them access to this tree to feed off of it. The tree of life is a behavioral entity. It has no consciousness, but God has the consciousness and he has control over it, and he banned them from it. The tree of life is producing something that we need in the spiritual realm. It's spiritual food. I call it love. We need this thing to balance our emotional state of being, to feel fulfilled. It's providing something that Adam and Eve needs to be fulfilled to find life, and they've been banned from it. God banned them from it. So that's another state of death. Okay, so even though in the physical realm they found life in flesh, at a spiritual level they're dead, and that's the death that God was talking about. Death in spirit. God is a spiritual being. So when He told them they were going to die, it's a spiritual. He was referencing their spirit. Okay, we covered some other aspects to the sin. When Adam sinned, and you notice that he's hiding from God. Before that was not the case. Before he was God's reflection in the garden, in the state of the garden, which is heaven, right? It's heaven on earth. It's the earth is heaven, all nature is heaven, the spiritual realm is heaven. Man is living in heaven in spirit, and he's living in heaven on earth. The whole thing is beautiful. He's in paradise, right? There's no disconnect. There's no disconnect with God. But after the sin, there's this disconnect. God is calling out to him. God is the truth. God is his conscience. And he's hiding. This is what sin does. It puts you in a state of hiding from your conscience. It puts you in a disconnected state from spirit. It disconnects you from God. Here's the other thing that sin does. It puts you in a state of darkness, spiritual darkness, emotional darkness, and weakness. Okay? Because Adam and Eve were kicked out of paradise, right, in spirit. They're living in darkness in spirit. So in flesh they look like they're alive, but in spirit they're dead. All right. Now the other thing to realize is that Adam and Eve, they're a reflection of God naturally, right? So God is the root of their being. God is the root of everything. God is the root of all existence. So in the state of sin, what happens is that they're in conflict with themselves. God, if they're in conflict with God, you're in conflict with yourself, the very essence of yourself. Being in conflict with God, being in conflict with yourself, you're going to be in conflict with nature. Nature. You're going to be in conflict with nature. I'm sorry. I skipped slides too quickly. I'm still following up on what I said the last slide, which are the detriments of this decision that Adam and Eve made. Okay, so if you're in conflict with God, right? You're going to be in conflict with yourself because God is the root of yourself naturally. That's the natural order, and you end up being in conflict with nature because God is nature. God is the essence of nature. So if you're at odds with God, you end up being at odds with nature. Here's the other aspect of it. That's just thinking of this as the state in the state of consciousness. And the other aspect of it, in the presence of our emotional being, right, and our spiritual being, the life which is in nature, which is a tree of life, which feeds nature and determines nature, we're disconnected from it, right? So then, because we're disconnected from it in spirit, because God banned us from it, nature looks to us also as foreign in that sense, because we're not connected to it through the tree of life. If we were connected to it through the tree of life, we would have felt it as being part of our beings. So we wouldn't even be thinking of the stars as being something that's out there, or the planets, or the earth as being this other thing, man against nature. We wouldn't even have that concept. We'd be feeling nature as a part of us, as being one with us, because we'd be connected to the life which flows through it and is fundamentally a part of it, and which we should be feeding off of. But we're disconnected from all that. Okay? Just quickly, some other detriments and some other consequences, unfortunate consequences of this decision that Adam and Eve made. One, they end up living lies, right? The physical realm is an illusion. So what the devil is telling them, this tool that, this reality that this devil is telling them to believe in and for a sense of identity, it's actually an illusion. The devil lied to them. So for them to be living that as a reality, living in this illusion as a reality, they're actually living lies. They're living a lie. And for them to be living this lie, they actually have to be lying to themselves. What the devil told them is that they can be their own God, that they can be some other being. You cannot be anything else other than your natural self. Whatever God made you to be, that's how you were meant to be. You can only be who you are. If you try to be something else, you're going to end up living a lie. Okay? The other thing is that they end up living unnaturally. Living lies, by definition, you're living unnaturally. You're not living in a realistic state. And because also you're not compatible with nature, that ends up becoming an unnatural state of existence. Also, there's this other consequence of the lust of flesh. because it's the lust of flesh that brought man into the realm of flesh as and to view flesh as a reality. That now becomes a detriment, because flesh, you become trapped in flesh and the desires of flesh. You're not just using flesh to achieve this thing, but this very mechanism that you're using, you end up becoming ingrained in it and become trapped in it. And the lust is a very powerful aspect of sin, because it draws us into sin. Um, Now, the other aspect of this decision is that you have a life of agony. This is what comes with it. God prophesies agony for man, agony with himself, agony in the relationships between man and woman, agony agony with nature. Nature is going to bring thorns. By the sweat of your brow you're going to eat bread. If you're chasing this great thing, instead of just relaxing at peace in nature like you were intended to do, you're going to have to do hard labor to get it, because you're chasing some other sense of identity. These are the consequences. Okay? The other thing is that man becomes finite in existence. When he's feeding off the tree of life, which is a spiritual entity, it's infinite. And if his identity is in spirit, he becomes infinite. He becomes eternal as God is. But by God determining that because of his sin, because he refuses to obey God, God puts him in a state of darkness, in hell basically, in spirit. And what it is, man takes on flesh and says, well, yeah, Adam took on flesh and said, well, I'm taking this life in flesh, but guess what? Flesh has a beginning and it has an end. It is not infinite. You're born and you die. So, and God made this point of dust thou art, to the dust you're going to return. That you've entered finite existence. This is what you've chosen as identity. That where it's born and where it dies, that's it. All right. So finite existence, that's one of the consequences. It's an unfortunate consequence, because guess what? When that flesh dies, that's when man is going to realize, the man who is a sinner and an evil man, that's when he's going to realize he's been living outside this kingdom of God and the reality of paradise. In spirit, he's living outside of it. Okay? So in order to be in this kingdom of God, you have to obey God's voice. You have to listen to him, which is your conscience. He's inside of us. So you have to listen to him, and that's how you get led into his kingdom and be infinite, live eternal life in paradise. All right, this is what's promised. It's promised in the Bible. You'll see it in the New Testament. This is what God is saying. All right, so these are the consequences. Some of the consequences of the evil that Adam and Eve engaged in, and listening to the devil, there's no good that can come out of that. All right. Consequences again. I mean, it's just agony. There's nothing good that came out of that. Okay, except for an illusion, that you get to live in an illusion. Adam lives in illusion. All right. Let's turn to these great questions here that I want to take on for this this presentation proper. How come the omniscient God never foresaw what Adam and Eve was going to do? Why would God create this whole thing, and knowing that Adam and Eve was going to do this? Or maybe he didn't know. How come God didn't know? That's a question. How come the omniscient God never saw what Adam and Eve was going to do? Why is Lucifer inspired to challenge God? That's another good question. Why does he approach Eve and not Adam? And why are Adam and Eve enticed by the idea of being God? So let's tackle these questions. So why didn't God foresee this whole thing? The answer is he actually did. He saw it. And I'm going to venture again to say that's exactly why he designed it. He knew Adam and Eve was going to do what they were going to do, and he designed it knowing that they were going to do that. And that's why he designed the whole thing. God is playing a game. Now, you might think it's a silly game, but it's a game of truth. Okay? What is God achieving by this? He's achieving a measure. He's assessing their commitment by it. Well, actually he knows, but he's opening it up. All right? I said before that we live in a spiritual. We have a spiritual identity. We lived in a spiritual realm before. We're conscious. So we lived with God before, right? In a state of paradise. What happened is we, in truth and in fact, we didn't belong there. You know why? Because deep within our consciousness there was something evil going on, and the potential for evil was there, and God saw it. That really and truly we didn't belong there. That's what he did. So what he did was he cast up this illusion. It's an illusion, this physical realm, and took us and put us in an illusion. And what that illusion did was it constituted a condition that helped entice us to be what it is that we really have deep within our consciousness, what it is we want to do. All right. So now, looking at this, we say, well, why did the devil want to challenge God? What inspired him? The, we can say, well, the short and quick answer is, well, the devil wants to be God himself. He wants to imitate God and have creatures follow him and do what he says. He wants God's power. The problem with that is that God made the devil and he defined the devil. He said God made the devil the most subtle of all the creatures in the garden, right? God defined this creature as behavioral. That means God made the devil to do what he did. So here's what happened. God created this illusion. He wrapped us, human beings, in this illusion. He wrapped up Adam and Eve in this illusion. And then he created this devil to entice them. Why? Because he wants man to do what it is that he has in his subconscious. Deep within that consciousness was that potential for evil. Right? So the devil is really an agent of God. God sent the devil as this alternate figure to go there and tempt man, give man this. So God gave these conditions. First, it was the physical realm in which he put man, and then send the devil to tempt, to show the potential, show them something that's within them, that they always had within them, because they wanted to disrespect God. Deep within them, they were in the spiritual realm, they weren't even conscious of it. But because to them they were good angels obeying God, but God saw it in them that they weren't right. There's something not right about them, and that they really, given the right conditions, they would disobey him. So now, why does the devil approach Eve? So Eve's place is to be Adam's companion. That's Eve's place. That's her natural place, right? She's there. When Adam was there by himself, he's living in spirit, right? He's in spirit. His focus is on the spiritual realm, and his body is his reflection on in the physical of his spiritual locus. So he's not focused on the physical realm. I mean, he's seeing it. I mean, he's perceiving it, but it's like a shadow. He's in spirit. He's wrapped up in spirit, obeying God. So he's there like as a son of God, just in the spiritual realm. With Eve with Eve made, what happens now? He develops an interest in the physical realm. So now he's not just spirit, just focused on spirit. He has an interest in the physical realm, because now he gets to do what the other animals are doing, what he sees the other animals doing, which is to reproduce and have family and stuff like that. And so Eve brings him into the realm into the material realm as not just a son of God, but as someone existing in a realistic sense, or someone existing in a sense as other creatures in the material realm. Now, part of Adam's engagement to her is not just as an intellectual companion, but is part of her role is in providing, is in lust. He has to lust after her to have sex with her, to reproduce. So the lust is important. Now, her role in providing lust, in having him lust, right, which is not the entirety of her role. That lust is supposed to be part of her own a spiritual relationship that they have. So the lust itself shouldn't be set, front and center as the focus of their relationship. It should be part and parcel of their spiritual relationship, because this is a relationship that God ordained. It was bounded by spirit, right? What God put together. So the lust was supposed to be a part of it. Why the devil approached her was that the lust of flesh is important in getting Adam to see um, to see the value of flesh, that flesh can be used for this great thing, to be chased after, for this glory, this personal glory, this independence and divorce from God, where you become your own God. All right. So her role in providing is 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 why the devil approached her was for her to use her role in getting him to lust, and use that, and so she uses that lust. She wakes up to his mind to lust of flesh proper, wakes it up, and so she abuses that role under the devil's influence, right? And to get him to follow this idea that he can be his own God. Now, we have to realize in this idea of the lust of flesh. The lust of flesh is that the first flesh that Adam and Eve have to lust after, it is their very own flesh. That's the very first flesh, because that's what God gave them. In order for them to be lusting and becoming creatures of flesh, just to be embedded in lust as a primary focus of their existence, they themselves have to lust after their flesh. So what they're doing is that they're feeding off flesh for life. They're feeding off this tree of knowledge of good and evil. So it's the lust after this tree of knowledge of good and evil that God told them not to feed off for life, but but the lust of it and feeding off of it for life, that constitutes the very first lust. Spiritually, they're lusting after their own flesh for life, right? And then they lust out after that, and they become trapped in flesh, feeding off flesh for life, for identity. So Eve's role is to abuse her proper role as the woman, to inveigle Adam's lust, and in the role that God put her in, she abused it and made herself some object of lust, and to draw Adam into a state of lust where he's lusting after his flesh and spirit, and then that state of lust becomes the reference for his lust after her, or the conditions his approach. Her thing was to lust after her very own flesh, right, in spirit, and then that sets the tone for her, for encouraging his lust. Okay, now that kind of thing that happens is it some that happened at its outset still happens today, where women objectify themselves, become creatures of lust to appeal to men, right? To appeal to man's attention, to get them to do something, and whatever it is always evil. Because if you're going to use lust of flesh to achieve something, it always ends up being evil. Okay, the lust of flesh, right, and just being wrapped up in that's a state of death, it's a state of darkness, it's a state of evil, it's a state of disrespect of spirit, it's a state of disrespect of God. Now, why are Adam and Eve enticed by this idea? And it's as I said before. Now, they were both Adam and Eve, mankind, people, we're conscious beings. Consciousness goes hand in hand with ego. Okay? It's the consciousness that defines our ego. Other animals don't have any ego. They don't have any consciousness. They don't have any ego. They can't produce ideas. It's out of the state of consciousness that we possess and process ideas. It's in the state of consciousness. And with that state of idea, the idea, the I, as a state of being, as a conceptual state of being, is the ego. Okay, ego goes along with consciousness. It's a state of self-definition. All right. So we have in our spiritual state of being, there's an emotional state that needs to feed off the tree of life, a behavioral, emotional presence of being as God is also, that needs to feed off the tree of life. And then there's this conceptual state, a conscious state, right? That's defined by ego. All right. Now, the idea that the devil introduced of this concept of personal greatness, he can introduce an idea because they can process ideas. Man can process ideas. So he can introduce this idea and it can become part of their consciousness and define and become a defining state of being. Okay? Now, um, when Adam and Eve in their consciousness in the spiritual realm before God cloaked them with flesh, right? Their consciousness always led them to obey God and to do His will and to be a part of His kingdom. All right. Once they I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So they were a part of His kingdom, but within their consciousness, deep within their consciousness, there was something not right, and God sees it. God sees everything. He knows within their consciousness, within their ability to process ideas, in their state of definition, that they have this potential to disobey Him and not want to be in His kingdom and not want to be a part of Him, right? And so, and they have this potential to want to be in hell. But if they're in the spiritual realm, they don't have anything to entice them for it, right? There's nothing there for them to grab onto, right? So what God does, He creates this illusion by which and that illusion creates a condition, and He sends the devil. He creates the devil to help entice them to bring out something that's in their consciousness, deep within their consciousness, which is this thing that they wanted to do, which was to disobey Him. Deep within themselves, they wanted to disobey Him, and so they get to be the devils that they wanted to be, right? Before they were created as children of God and living in that state, they were just children of God, listening to the devil and abiding by the devil, and moving their consciousness to the idea provided by the devil. They became children of the devil, okay. There was no evil upon the face of the earth or in creation, all right, or in the spiritual realm. But what happened? What happened? None of the other creatures are evil or possess any potential for it, because nothing else possesses consciousness. Mankind brought evil into existence. He moved his consciousness to follow the devil. Right? This devil's idea of chasing personal glory and using flesh to do it and absorbing themselves in flesh and lusting after flesh. So that's how you get this consciousness. That's how man ends up being in the state of consciousness following the devil's idea. I just want to point out before I close out, fear, um, as a consequence of following the devil, of living evil. What happens is when man, Adam, defined himself by flesh, he moves himself from spirit and defines himself by flesh, he becomes fearful. Why? Because flesh can die. And if it dies, is everything, the identity that he has is gone, because his identity is in flesh. So he lives in a perennial state of fear once he's evil. This is what evil does. All right. All right, we'll close it out there for today, and I'm sorry, we won't close out. Let's just do some general applications here. Just to notice that Adam and Eve is replicated in our lives. It's not just a story at the beginning. It's something that has happened throughout all human history. We inherited their psychology. That psychology, that mentality that was developed from the very beginning, it was passed on to us, okay? The same thing is happening. God is playing a game with us, with all of us, not just Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve's first circumstances were this illusion of physical existence and the devil coming along, and that's all it took for them to drift them. throughout human history, along with those two particular influences, there are other influences that helps us to drive us to do evil. Circumstances of family, of society, of experience, things that might tempt us towards evil, right? Those circumstances are not accidental. God knows how we process reality, and He puts us in these conditions where we're born, when we're born, who we're interacting with, all this stuff. This is not accidental. Okay? Um, Also, notice the devil is still tempting, right? So that thing is still going on. The lust of flesh still draws us into sin. That's still a reality. Chasing greatness, chasing personal glory, the unnatural ambition to be what we're not supposed to be. These are things that cause our downfall. Beware of them. Take these lessons from Adam and Eve. Don't listen to this devil. He's in spirit. Don't chase after flesh. Chase after spirit. Live in spirit. Don't chase after this personal glory that's not for you. Live the life that God made you to live. Live in His image and be His reflection. All right. All right. That's that. Okay. I think we're done. We're pretty much done for today. Thanks for checking me out.